Michelle, can you hear us?
Richard, just give us a couple minutes to get started here.
Good to go?
We're not hearing any volume from your end at the moment.
Can you hear us now? Can you hear us now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. That's our financial, the delegation is coming on, the auditor. Okay. Good evening again, everybody. Welcome to the February 15th regular council meeting. As we start our meeting, we remember that we are on the traditional territory of the Sioux First Nation within the area of Treaty 3, and that many of the people and communities we service are in the areas of Treaties 5 and 9, the Anishinaabe Nation. I'd also like to apologize publicly to staff and council and any public from the last meeting where I didn't have complete control and there was some distracting noise going on in the public section of the gallery. So apologize to staff for that. It's the chair's role to control that. It is not a public meeting. It is a meeting of council open to the public, and so it remains. And I also apologize for not having my electronic device on me. I'm going to Dryden for the District Services Board meeting tomorrow. So I happily walked into the office, because I'll take the municipal car away tonight, but happily walked in without a briefcase over my back and just forgot it all at home. So I'll just lean over to you a little bit during the course of the meeting. Thanks. Underway, are there any amendments to the agenda?
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, we have none.
Thank you. Motion that the agenda for the regular council meeting of February 15th, 2023 be approved as presented. Moved by Councillor Timpson, seconded by Councillor Costco. All in favor? Carried. Declarations of pecuniary interest.
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, I have none.
Thank you. And we have a motion to adopt the minutes of the regular council meeting held on January 18th, 2023 and the special council meetings held on January 9th, 2023 and January 19th, 2023, that they be approved as presented. Moved by Councillor Lego, seconded by Councillor Cassidy. Any discussion? Councillor Cassidy.
Just on the January 18th minutes regarding the Mayfair Theatre, it says to pursue option 1, but I believe there was an addition or a caveat to that for a term of 1 more year. It says to just continue marketing it in its current state to attempt to sell. But I believe discussion at council that night was for 1 more year.
I recall that we added that as a caveat. Yeah, I do recall that. Council, is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll amend the minutes then.
Yes, we can make that correction, Your Worship.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Cassidy. Anything further? All in favor of adopting the minutes as amended? Carried. Motion to receive the minutes of the December 22nd, 2022 Kenora Home for the Age Board of Management meeting minutes be received. Moved by Councillor Van Breda, seconded by Councillor Cassidy. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Determination of items requiring separate discussion. This will be reasonably short tonight, but 7.1, 2022 Operating Financial Report, the variances report. Yes, okay, Councillor Lego. And we do need to lift item 7.2 because it's a notice of motion, so that is lifted. And delegations. We have 2 delegations tonight. The first is the Ontario Fire Marshal's Field Officer's presentation to Rob Favot for 46 years of fire service. And I invite Larry Lundy to step forward with Rob Favot. You go, let's have Rob in the middle. How's that? We have a couple of presentations from Mr. Favot. The first one is a plaque from the Office of the Fire Marshal and John Pegg, which is the Fire Marshal of Ontario. It states Rob Favot, Fire Chief of Sioux Lookout Fire Service, in recognition
of his retirement after 46 years of dedication to the Ontario Fire Service. Your commitment to fire and life safety and the leadership you have shown in your community are sincerely appreciated. Also is a presentation from the Fire Marshal, a letter in recognition, and being that Rob was in the fire service in Sioux for 40, I would like the mayor to, as a worship to.
I'd be pleased to. Thanks, Larry. Chief Robert Favot, Sioux Lookout Fire Services. Dear Robert, I would like to express my personal congratulations to you for your 46 years of dedication to the Ontario Fire Services. There are many reasons why the public holds the fire service in such high esteem. We have earned their trust through the challenging job we perform and have gained their respect through the dedication and commitment of fire chiefs like yourself. Congratulations on a long and valued career. You are a credit to your community and to the province of Ontario. Sincerely, John Pegg, Fire Marshal of Ontario.
Right there. Oh, I need a second set of hands here. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Larry. Congratulations again, Rob.
Thanks.
Thank you, Rob.
Thanks, Rob.
Saved my neck a couple of times.
Perhaps the only measure on a council that could go against that is Hazel McCallion. I'm not sure. 46 years is a long term of service. Thank you, Rob. Our second delegation is Grant Thornton LLP 2021 audited financial statements. Our auditors, Richard Jagowitz and Judy Kleinhus. Motion to bring them forward, that council authorizes and directs that $1,204,000 in 2020 COVID-19 funding be transferred. Sorry? Oh, so we don't have to put it on the table? No? Okay, thank you. The delegation is here. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. My name is Judy Kleinhaus. I'm the engagement principal signing off the audit for the municipality. And before I pass it on to Richard, I just wanted to spend a few minutes sort of walking through what an audit is and what an audit isn't. So just a reminder that when you look at these financial statements, they look different than how you budget. For example, when you budget for purchasing a new piece of equipment, let's say a snowplow, you would expense that in your budget. And if you were to borrow a loan, for example, on that equipment, you would budget the loan proceeds as revenue. But for accounting purposes, loan proceeds are not revenue, and a capital asset is not an expense, it's capitalized. So just keep that in mind as you go through these financial statements, because they will differ in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards from how you budget. When we audit for what we call a reasonable assurance. We don't audit for absolute assurance, because you actually would never get absolute assurance, because you still can't audit what's not there. Also, we audit for what we call a material misstatement, and design our procedures to make sure that we would detect material misstatements. So we're not saying that these financial statements are perfect and contain zero errors. What we're saying is we're comfortable that we design procedures to detect material misstatements. So if, for example, there was a $10,000 misstatement that we became aware of, and management did not correct that, that would not be considered material to the financial statements. However, if, for example, we became aware of a $1 million misstatement, if that happened, we would present it to management and ask them to correct the financial statements. And if for some reason management chose not to correct a level of misstatement that is material, then we would actually change our audit opinion. Also, when we do the audits, we don't audit every account or every transaction or every balance. At the planning stage, we identify areas of risk, and we spend more of our energies in areas of higher risk. and spend less of our energy in areas of lower risk. So for example, on some accounts, we might take the approach of comparing to prior years into budget. On another account, we might do a scope test and say, let's look at everything over a dollar threshold. And on other accounts, we might put the whole population of transactions into the computer and let the computer pick a sample. The other item to note is that although we do look at your internal controls when we plan the audit to decide how we're going to audit certain sections, this is not an opinion on your controls. It's strictly an opinion on the financial statements. And the financial statements actually belong to management. So although we've assisted management in drafting the financial statements and the related note disclosures, management takes responsibility for the financial statements. Grant Thornton as auditors takes responsibility for issuing the audit report. And council, in the absence of an audit committee, council has oversight responsibility for financial reporting. So I'd like to just take a second and officially read the opinion, which reads as follows. In our opinion, the accompanying consolidated financial statements present fairly, in all material respects, the consolidated financial position of the Corporation of the Municipality of Sioux as at December 31st, 2021, and its results of consolidated operations, consolidated changes in net financial assets, and its consolidated cash flows for the year that ended in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards. So in other words, it is your clean audit opinion. So now I'll pass it on to Richard to walk through some of our audit results.
Thank you, Judy. So there should have been a few documents that council would have received. What we're going to be going through is our audit results document that essentially states the corporation and municipality of Sioux Lookout for the year ended December 31st, 2021, report to the council. That's going to be the first document we go through. We'll then go through the consolidated financial statements to talk about some of the changes that have happened from a year-over-year perspective. We'll keep it a bit more high level, but again, if anyone has any questions, please feel free. So we're going to start with the audit results package. And again, one of the reasons why we do this audit results package is twofold. One is for the purpose of there being two-way communication, and the other reason is for council to meet one of their obligations to provide this oversight for management in terms of the financial reporting process and as well reviewing the financial statements and ultimately approving them. So on the executive summary, which is numbered page 1 at the bottom right, the status of the audit is we are substantially completed the audit. Really what's left is receipt of signed management representation letters, which there's a draft including the appendices, the approval of the consolidated financial statements, which is what we're going to be going through after this report. As well, there's the approval of the Sioux Lookout Public Library Board statements, and as well the trust funds. We're not going to be going through those financial statements in detail. They're there for your review, but we are looking for approval of those financial statements as well, which are consolidated within the main municipal financial statements. As well, we are waiting on receipt of a confirmation on a few outstanding legal matters, just a follow-up phone call with some of the lawyers that we've gotten confirmations from. As well, we requested management to present resolutions in regards to transfers of reserve funds by council. And then as well, just some follow-up on some subsequent event procedures. With that, we're going to move on to page number 2, audit risks and results. And one of the things that was still an impact for the municipality in 2021 was COVID-19 impact. So again, we talked about this in greater detail in 2020, but 2021 still had an impact, and there was funding that was received as a result for COVID-19 purposes. So overall here, we briefly just note the fact that in the financial statements, there's about $1.6 million in funding that's recognized. And based on support provided by management, this is supported by some of the revenue loss and pandemic related operating pressures in the amount of $2.4 million. So overall, we ensure that the disclosure that's provided in the financial statements is accurate and that there hasn't any disconnect from what's included in the statements, and we have no exceptions to note there. On page 3, we talk about some of your significant transactions that have happened in the year. Tangible capital assets was a big one. I'm sure many of you know that there was a consultant that was hired during the year to evaluate some of the linear assets. So that was a process for sure that management had to go through, and give them kudos for it. But overall in the year for your tangible capital assets, there was total additions of about $3.9 million. Mainly these assets are still assets under construction, about $3.3 million of that 3.9. 627 of it related to a waterfront project, 1.7 million for a storm project, and $348,000 for wastewater alternate disinfection. So you can see some of the details down there below, and one item that you'll see is there as well is a line called write-off. And this is a process and what was identified by the consultant that was hired to evaluate the linear assets, where they identified essentially assets that their useful life has been worn down. So essentially there were assets that had value on records in the past, but through the consultant's work, identified that these items are now fully amortized. So that is a bigger expense that's hit basically your financial statements. On the government transfer side, again, there was significant government transfer funding in the tune of about $8.1 million of revenues. The majority of that funding, you can see, is broken down there between the province of Ontario and government of Canada. The biggest grants that were there was the OMPF funding you received of about $1.4 million and the COVID-19 funding of $1.6. The remaining of the funding was related to NOHFC and FedNor grants associated with various capital projects that were also included there.
Richard, excuse me,
Yes.
question, what page are you on, is the question from council?
Page 3. Page 3.
Because some of the numbers you're quoting
Of which document?
different from here.
Oh, emailed.
Yeah, so it won't be on your e-scribe, it's in your email. That's the
This one right here?
Yeah.
That's right here. Yeah, that's what he's, right here.
Did you have a question, Councilor Legault? All right, carry on.
If you would like to, I can share my screen actually for the presentation report if you would like that, just so that way it's present.
That would be good.
Give me just one moment. Hopefully you can see it there now.
No. It's quite small.
Well, you know what I'll do is I'll zoom in if that works a little bit better.
Anybody else?
Just hang on, Richard, we're getting some hard copies here that'll help out.
No problem.
The bulk of it is in our e-scribe package, the agenda package, but the slide presentation was emailed to us separately, so we have to, it's not accessible. Go with, yeah. What did you got yours? Yeah. Okay. Carry on. And what page of the slide presentation? Page 3?
Page 3, yeah. At the bottom right, you'll see the numbering.
Very good.
Thank you. So overall, again, those are some of the bigger items that happen with your tangible capital assets and government transfers, and these are considered significant purely because of the dollar amount that's associated with them. So again, maybe just as a high cap, you can see for the tangible capital assets, the sum of the additions, the amortization, the write-off I was referring to from the consultant's work that was performed on your later assets, and then the loss and disposal of assets. The government transfers themselves, again, there was $8.1 million in government transfers in 2021. This mainly resulted from OMPF funding and COVID-19 funding. Other considerations as well were funding associated with capital projects where funding was received or deferred in the prior years and then earned as a result of the activities for your capital projects. So we'll continue to move forward on the significant risks, and when it comes down to significant risks, there are areas where we believe there is a higher risk of a material misstatement or there's a presumed fraud risk. The first area here talks about the fact that we do recognize there is a presumed fraud risk in revenue. Again, this is a standard that we follow. At the end of the day, it relates to government transfers or grants. The reason being for it is that in order for you to recognize that associated revenue, you have to make sure that you spend the associated expenses for that to occur. So as a result, we spend additional work reviewing grant agreements in details, understand the eligibility associated with them, trace the sample of transactions back to ensure that it was appropriate, and we didn't identify any concerns noted there. The other risk that we identify is that there is a fraud risk from management override control. Essentially, Carly Collins, your treasurer, does have access to a lot of different system functions, and as a result of that, there's the opportunity for there to be an override of controls that's intended there. As a result, what we've done is we performed journal entry testing and reviewed various different transactions that was posted by Carly in the system to identify whether or not they're reasonable and appropriate. And as a result of it, we didn't find any concerns or exceptions noted through our testing. The other piece as well is we keep an eye out for any fraud and illegal acts. So I know Judy at the beginning talked about the concept of materiality. When it comes down to fraud or illegal acts, we don't put a dollar value on it. So if at any point in time through our work we identify anything fraud related or any illegal acts, we bring that to council's attention immediately. So as a result, though, when we went through our testing, discussions with management, and other considerations, nothing came to our attention that we feel we would need to bring to the attention of council. So we're going to be moving on to the accounting practices. So with accounting practices, there's a couple of accounting estimates that are included in here. The reason why we call them accounting estimates is because there isn't a piece of paper that we can go to and say, this is the dollar value of the estimate. This is based on professional judgment that's provided by management or through a third-party expert that management has hired. So the examples here are your allowance for doubtful accounts and your taxes receivable, landfill closure and post-closure liability costs, and employee future benefits. Overall, with your allowance for doubtful accounts, we consider whether or not what management has set up as an allowance to be considered appropriate based on the consideration of tax registration for properties, what is going on with outstanding tax balances that are greater than 2 years old, and other considerations. Similarly with landfill closure and post-closure, we rely on the usage associated with that landfill as well as an engineering report that essentially tells us the estimated cost that would be for every single cubic ton of landfill. And the employee future benefits liability, we rely on an expert report provided by Dixon Actuarial Services to ensure that management has followed those considerations for the estimate. And through their testing, we believe that the allowance that's set up by management to be considered appropriate and reasonable. Similarly, the same consideration for the landfill closure and post-closure liability, and as well the employee future benefit liability consideration. And you can see the balances that are there, and we'll speak more to the taxation allowance for doubtful accounts a little bit later on in our presentation. In terms of the adjustments and uncorrected differences on the next page, what you see here is the adjustments, and these are adjustments that we've recommended to management through the audit work that was completed. So overall, these are the ones that we've noted for the municipality themselves. So there is an opening balance adjustment that we've posted, and we've talked with Carly and management that this is something we're going to try to resolve so that it doesn't continue going forward. So we're going to be working with management in preparation for the 2022 year-end audit to make sure that this doesn't appear on next year's report. Other adjustments you can see there are recognizing the Sioux lookout hydro activity, adjusting the future employee benefits liability based on the actuarial report, working with management to update the landfill liability estimate, an adjustment to deferred revenue based on activity in the year, adjustment consideration for capital assets for capitalization purposes, just payable for the home for the ages as well, where there's a liability situated there that is accounted for Sioux lookout, and as well a reconciliation of year-end reserve and reserve fund transfers. So you can see all the different amounts there that are sitting at the bottom, and as a result, again, the reason why these have been adjusted and reflected in your accounting system is because some of them are being considered material or just a part of the year-end process that we as auditors have assisted management in preparing. Following through, you can see that the next one is the Sioux Lookout Public Library Board, so we included it here as well. Again, the Sioux Lookout Public Library Board and trust funds are significantly smaller than the municipality on a consolidation basis. So for the public library, adjustments that we've recommended to management is an adjustment for future employee benefits liability, an adjustment associated with payroll accrual, and an adjustment associated with tangible capital assets. So overall, although the balances are smaller, Sioux Lookout Public Library has a much smaller materiality as well. And as for the trust fund audit, there hasn't been any differences noted. Now, moving on to the uncorrected differences, these are items, for example, that we've identified as being misstatements, but weren't considered to be significant enough, however, needed to be brought to management's to the council's attention because it still surpasses a certain threshold that we recognize as trivial. So you'll note that for the municipality, we have no non-trivial unadjusted differences to report. Many of the non-trivial differences we have identified have been adjusted as recommended to management. There were some that have been identified for Sioux Lookout Public Library Board and trust funds. So for example, for the library, there was an understatement of specific capital assets, an understatement of a prepaid, and an overstatement of grant revenue funds recognized. Now, the reason why these haven't been adjusted is again because they're trivial and they're items that will clear in 2022 as decided by management. In regards to the trust funds, there was an overstatement of revenue by about $726, and again, smaller dollar figures, but the trust funds, because of its size, have much smaller materiality in consideration. So these are noted here for council's attention, but also for management's attention to understand what things we're looking at, and if management wants to address these items, we're more than happy to talk to them about. But because they were so small, we didn't recommend them as adjustments to management to be reflected in the statements. And then the following page, summary disclosure matters, you'll note that the audit did not identify any unadjusted non-trivial differences for disclosure matters, and the reason being is we assist management in the preparation of the financial statements. Ultimately, it is management's responsibility, and they take responsibility for the financial statements, but as a result, we assist in the preparation of the appropriate disclosures, and management hasn't questioned or pushed back on any of the required disclosures that are needed in the financial statements. On the following page, on other reportable matters, on the internal control piece of things, again, Julie already mentioned the fact that we don't provide an opinion on your internal controls, but we have to gain an understanding of them to plan our audit accordingly. So we will note in our appendix later on some of the internal control matters we want to bring to your attention. Similarly, we're in a world of technology where a lot of things are being done remotely now. So again, we always encourage that council keep an eye on cybersecurity measures and making sure that their IT is up to snuff to make sure that they're avoiding any type of cyber criminal activity. It's kind of scary hearing some of the things that happen in terms of information and funds being held as ransom. So again, we always encourage for council to have conversations with management in terms of ensuring that their IT's holding up strong within the environment. And again, if this is something that management or council would like to have a conversation with us, we're more than happy to be available for it. And the other thing is our independence. One of the most important things is that we have to remain independent from beginning through the process and to the end of an audit. And as a result, what we can report here is that we have no information to present to you regarding any independence concerns or threats throughout the process of the audit or to the end of it. The next page as well, because this is a public entity, we do state our fees associated in here too. So essentially, you'll note that we have our prior year fees and current year fees. So these fees themselves are what's been proposed fees and does not include out-of-scope services and additional accounting assistance. An example of that is this year, as a result of the work that was performed by the consultants, we did have to do additional work associated with ensuring that that's been properly recognized in the financial statements and doing work to make sure that management has followed the consultant's recommendations. So as a result, the total fees have been identified there, and that's based on the proposal that has been accepted back, I believe, last year. Moving on to the next page, technical updates. This is for council's purposes, but as well management's. Here we identify some of the technical updates that are happening within the municipality or public sector world. So there's noted accounting and assurance considerations of changes that are happening. One of the biggest considerations we've discussed with management is the consideration of asset retirement obligations. And maybe what we'll do is save this consideration, but the biggest thing is that for your 2023 audit, essentially, there's going to be a requirement to have to identify any type of land or assets, essentially, that are held where there could be considered a liability such as asbestos considerations. This is a big change that's coming up, and I don't want to take up the meeting today to discuss it in detail, but encourage management to have the conversation with council, and as well, if need us to be involved, happy to be a part of that conversation as well. Under the assurance piece, one of the big things that we will note is there has been a change in our auditing standard requirements based on CPA Canada. So as a result, it's called CAS 315, and what it requires us to do for the upcoming audit as well is to get more information and understand further spectrums of the risk that are inherent to the municipality, including your IT systems and other control activities. So there's going to be further work that's going to have to be completed in the 2022 year-end audit that we wanted to bring to council's attention. That's going to be a change, and further discussions and expectations of documentation are going to be needed for the 2022 year-end audit, but we will work with management to ensure that that gets documented and carried forward. So then we'll move on to Appendix A. I'm not going to go through Appendix A in a lot of detail. Appendix A just talks essentially about the roles and responsibilities in the audit process, as well as understanding everyone's role in this process. And that includes council, management, and us as Grant Thornton as the auditors. Judy already spoke pretty well in terms of what our role and responsibility are as auditors, so we're not going to go through it again. But as well, their role of council, again, is to help set the tone for the organization as well, provide that oversight of management, and directly oversee the work of the external auditors and the discussion of the audit plan. Management's, again, is to make sure that the financial statements are prepared in accordance with Canadian public accounting standards and ensuring that they're exercising sound judgment, making sure they're maintaining their internal controls and preventing detecting errors as well as other considerations there. The following page talks about our audit approach. Again, it's a there's details provided here, but essentially we go through a planning stage, risk assessment stage, we evaluate your internal controls, and then we do our testing, and finally we're at the stage where we're concluding reporting and sharing our results with council and management. The other piece here as well is that because of the different considerations in the consolidated statements, you'll note that this is considered a group audit. We consider the Sioux Public Library Board, the Sioux Airport considerations, and as well the Sioux Hydro Incorporated, which municipality has an investment in. So we note the different things that we do. We perform a separate audit on the Sioux Public Library Board. We perform separate procedures on the Sioux Airport transactions, and then with Sioux Hydro Incorporated. We also review the audited financial statements that are provided by BDO Canada, and we review their audit results package to ensure that we're comfortable with the way the auditors have addressed the risks so that we can rely on the information that we use to incorporate within your financial statements. Materiality, Judy brought this to point, and again, materiality really is just a number that we utilize as a benchmark based on user expectations and the adherence or concern of risk of material misstatements to the financial statements. So on page 16, we'll note that the corporation and municipality of Sioux has a materiality basis of 1.2 million approximately. Sioux Public Library Board is 11,500, and the trust funds is 4,900. So in terms of work, just because an organization is smaller doesn't mean that the audit work that's involved in it is less. It's all relative to the size of the organization itself. And since we issue 3 separate audit opinions on these organizations, they all need to have their own separate materiality levels. The following considerations from here on out talk about, and I already spoke to some of the fraud risk considerations above, so we're not going to go through that in more detail. The quality control piece of it is essentially just speaking to the fact that there is multiple layers of review in this process. There are the people who execute the audit engagement, myself as the senior manager who reviews the work, and then Judy Kleinhaus, who is the signing principal on it, who also does another review through the process. And then on the following page, we talk about our audit technology that we use throughout the process. That basically, as Judy mentioned, sometimes we rely on technology to select samples where things may look odd or unusual to draw our attention to make sure that we do our work on that section. Appendix B talks about our draft independent auditors report. Judy already spoke to this, so again, it refers to the clean audit opinion that's been issued, and she already spoke to it at the beginning, so I won't go through this in any more detail. Appendix C is the draft management representation letter. This is a letter that will be signed by Michelle and Carly as we relied on different representations they've made to us throughout the audit process, so this will be a letter that we'll be sending to them for signing to be included in our audit file for documentation. I'll spend a little bit of time on Appendix D, the draft internal control letter. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we don't provide an opinion on your internal controls, but what we do is we will bring anything to your attention where we see that there is concern or things to be brought forward to be addressed in future audits and changes to the operations. The one that's consistent with in the past is the segregation of duties. Essentially, at the end of the day, we'd like to see certain roles be separated within the finance department. Again, we recognize the fact that due to the size and nature of the municipality, to be able to have more individuals within your finance department to basically ensure that there's a proper segregation of duties may not be feasible. Again, the reason for this is Carly Collins, your treasurer, essentially has access to a lot of different softwares and abilities to make certain adjustments, and there isn't a formal review process in place or comprehensive policies and procedures. And again, that's just because of the size of your finance group and team, and sometimes it's just not feasible or cost effective to remove this concern, but we still have to bring it to your attention as your auditors. So we do recognize there's competency controls in place, and of course we always encourage that. The biggest thing that's competency control in our opinion is council's focus and asking of questions when they're looking at financial information, and as well as reviewing invoices and other documentation whenever you guys are signing checks or looking at other details. So we can continue to encourage council to be involved, ask questions if something doesn't look right, and get clarification from management. The other piece that we'll note here is the other control deficiency is the final statement close process. Through discussions with Michelle and Carly, we've identified the fact that there was a lot going on in 2022 with the consultant coming in, doing the work on the tangible capital asset review, as well as there being some staffing issues. What we've noted here is that during the audit, throughout the process, management has provided us with 60 adjusting journal entries affecting the year-end financial records. And again, it's a result of the fact that, Carly's only one person, there's lots of work that has to be done in preparing for the financial statement close process. So we noted the fact that as a result of some of the other projects going on and some of the staffing issues, this resulted in delays during the audit process, which also included certain errors that needed to be resolved or adjusted, and additional work procedures or additional substantive procedures to be completed. So what we recommend for this process, again, is just that management think about implementing a process to ensure that there's a reduction in any type of noise during the financial statement close process, and if anything can be automated within the process, to consider that as well to alleviate any pressures from their workload to make the financial statement close process smoother. And that's essentially it for the internal control processes for documentations and comments. Again, this is in draft format because it hasn't yet been accepted by council, but at the end of the day, we've had conversations with management on these points and have raised the fact they acknowledge what's noted here, and to move forward on with the 2022 year-end audit. The following appendices from here on in just provide some additional details in regards to cybersecurity, which is Appendix E on page 27. And Appendix F and G talk about the different auditing developments and accounting developments. And again, we provided a summary of the highlights above, but this provides further details associated with it. So overall, at the end, this is here for management's perspective to review. We've noted essentially the impacts and the start dates of these effective impacts, so we encourage management to take a read, and if you have any questions, to reach out to us to have a conversation to make sure that they're aware of what their requirements are. And that's our audit results package. The next thing we'll jump into is going to be the financial statements of the municipality, but I wanted to take a moment and pause and see if there's any questions from council at this moment.
Council, questions so far? Councillor Timpson.
Just a question as to CAO as to whether the issues identified can be corrected or are they not feasible in our setting?
The one issue with reference to the segregation of duties. The one issue with reference to the segregation of duties is common in a lot of municipalities our size because of staffing, and we don't have enough staff to segregate those duties properly. We can work to segregate some of the duties, but there's still going to be an issue moving forward with that. I'm confident in Carly's abilities and the staff's abilities that it's not a huge issue for our municipality, and it's always been on every one of our financial statements, and in my past history with other municipalities and working with them, it's been in there as well, unless you're a large corporation. So I wouldn't worry about that too much, but there is the opportunity to take a look at how we're doing it and try and segregate some of those duties. For example, journal entries where Carly's not writing the journal entries, entering the journal entries, stuff like that.
And were there other issues as well, or?
The only other thing on there was the mention of the 60 journal entries and the adjustments that had to be done because of timeliness of getting the information to the auditors. Okay. So that we already have a plan and a timeline for this year for our 22 statements.
Councillor Costco.
Do we have a cybersecurity breach and attack response plan?
We don't have a plan at this time, no.
Do we have a plan to make a plan?
We did have an attack in the last 2 years, and but since we've beefed up our IT, it hasn't been an issue. I know insurance companies are looking to municipalities to buy cyber insurance as well, but that still doesn't prevent the attack. So we will be looking at policies around that as well.
Anything further, Council? Back to you, Richard.
Thank you. So next we're going to be jumping into the consolidated financial statements of the Corporation of the Municipality of Sioux. So we're going to jump straight to the page 3 at the bottom right of the page, noted as the consolidated statement of financial position. And this will note, and I don't want to share my screen again, but this will essentially here note what financial assets the municipality has, what liabilities and non-financial assets as well. So in this case here, I'm just gonna go over on some of items high level. Overall, one big thing you'll notice is your cash and cash equivalents has gone up in 2021. The main reason is because your operations did generate $9.1 million of funds through its general operations. There was capital purchases that I mentioned earlier of $3.9 million and debt repayment of 1.2. So when you consider all of those considerations, that gets you to the difference there of about $4.1 million. So there is cash in the bank, and that's always good to see. The next big thing that you'll notice that changes your accounts receivable. In the prior year, there was accounts receivable associated with the Safe Restart funding, as well as government funding for NHFC, approximately $800,000 related to the waterfront development project. As well in the year, there's some other decreases associated with general receivables with the airport and general AR for the municipality of about $148,000 each. So if you take that into consideration, that accounts for about $1 million difference there. The other items that you notice there are not very significant, but that gives you total financial assets of just over $21.6 million. The liabilities on this end here, you'll notice your liability costs for your accounts payable have gone down. And again, last year there was quite a few projects that were ongoing as well, and some of the payables were still outstanding at the end of the year. So as a result, that was the timing of your payables. This year, we don't see a lot of those construction payables or engineering payables as a result of those projects. So overall, that's decreased. And as well, last year we noted that there was quite a significant payable to one of the school boards for Mouse Calling. So that was about in the tune of $500,000 that no longer exists at the end of this year. So that overall timing was a big part to play in the difference in changing your accounts payable. In regards to deferred revenue, it has gone up a little bit in the year. There is some deferred revenue with FedNor. FedNor tends to advance funds. So as a result, there is some funds there for some capital projects that you receive but haven't earned it yet because the expenses haven't been incurred. And you'll notice your debt as well has decreased by about $1.2 million. Overall, at the end, that's just through debt repayment following the normal repayment schedules for your debt. So one thing that I will note here, and this is the positive sign, is you'll notice that last year that there's net financial assets and in brackets debt. So last year, the municipality was in a net financial debt position. This year, they're in a net financial asset position of $453,000, meaning essentially that the value of your assets outweigh the value of your liabilities, and that means that the municipality is moving in the right direction. We encourage them to keep an eye on spending and ensuring they're maintaining their liabilities and having cash flows available to support other projects and operations. For your non-financial assets, you'll notice tangible capital assets, and in this case here, some of the things that have in capital assets, as I mentioned, $3.9 million in acquisitions. There's amortization of $3.3 million. There was a loss in disposal of assets of about $443,000, and a write-down as per the consultant's report about $1.1 million. When you consider all those things into consideration, it equates to the $975,000 difference that you see there. So overall, when you consider all of those items, you have an accumulated surplus of $76 million, which we'll discuss more on Schedule 1. So now we're going to move on to the statement of operations, which covers off essentially your revenue and expenditures for the year. So I'll be speaking to some of the higher items. So overall, the total revenues in the year were budgeted for $33.2 million. In the year, the municipalities earned $36.2 million, and the last year, $29.5 million. Some of the bigger differences are as a result of some of those changes is looking at, one is the residential and farm taxation. It's lower than what was expected as a result of higher write-offs in the year when only $13,000 was budgeted. So I believe there was tax write-offs of about $306,000. The other items that we've noted as well is your other fees and service charges. Budgeted $5.2 million, but at the end of the day, there was additional funds that were earned of the municipal accommodation tax revenue, airport improvement fees, and landfill fees that have been earned, and those all have equated to the budget difference in consideration. And then again, keeping in mind 2020 was a COVID year, overall, the other fees and service charges exceeded expectations in terms as a result of starting to come out of COVID a little bit more in 2021. For government transfers, you'll notice that at the end of the day, Government of Canada had a much smaller budget of $753,000, and the main reason for it is because there wasn't anything budgeted for the RADI support. So as a result of some of the RADI funding that was received in the tune of $1.4 million, that's why there's a significant increase there. And then as well for the province of Ontario, we noted the fact that there was additional progress made more than what was initially budgeted for the waterfront development, Bigwood property assessment, and service extension. So overall, those are some of the considerations of why there's some variances there. The other piece you'll notice under other is that your sale of aviation fuel exceeded expectations there. $6.9 million in terms of what was budgeted, $7.3 million earned there. And then the only other odd item that I'll make note of is the other municipalities for the POA piece. So again, there's revenue and costs associated with it. There was a 2020 portion that was not picked up. Again, it was a smaller amount, about 58 grand, but it did result to look that this is in a loss position this year because there's more costs incurred than there was revenue earned through that process. And the only other bigger difference I want to bring to your attention is the other, of the $277,311 versus the $40,000. And the biggest thing there is that there was budget plans for partner contributions, sale of different properties and lands that just never came to fruition in the year, so there was no other revenue earned there. But as you can see, the total budget that was approved by council is $33.2 million there, and overall $36 million was earned, so exceeded expectations from that perspective. So we'll go into the expenses next. And overall, your expenses in the year were budgeted for $30.9 million. In the current year, you incurred $31.4 million. The main reason for some of those considerations is that your transportation services were budgeted for 13.8, but your actuals for transportation services 14.8. The main reason for that difference in consideration is because of there was a budget difference associated with aircraft fuel purchases. So again, there was more fuel purchased in the year, but we saw the fact that the revenue has increased significantly from the budget consideration. And there was also a payment to heavy transit that was not budgeted to the tune of $335,000. So those considerations is the reason why there's some differences there between the budget and actual. In terms of the prior year consideration to the current year, the biggest thing we can say again is that the airport fuel purchases over exceeded what was expected for budget purposes and over exceeded a lot from 2020's COVID year. So that was the main reason why you'll see about a $3 million increase in expenses in transportation services. Some of the other considerations and differences you see in environmental services have to do with that write-down of assets from the consultant that we talked about, that 1.1 million. So that's one of the biggest reasons for the environmental services differences. Similarly, for health services and social and family services, some of the differences there between the current year and prior year and budgets has to do with the fact of wages that just didn't come to fruition. They were not as high in 2021, and also some utility fees and costs that we budgeted for a higher price or higher amount that just never happened. So again, maintaining lower costs or budgeted a little bit more conservatively just to ensure that the cost didn't go over budget. So with the revenue and expenses in consideration, now there's basically a net revenues of 4.7 million. Now this 4.7 million is not your true surplus. This is your PSEP surplus. So this will be spoken to later on by management when we get to Schedule 1. Again, we recognize the fact there was a loss in disposal of tangible capital assets of $443,000, so your annual surplus overall is $4.3 million. That gets picked up into your accumulated surplus at the beginning of the year, so then your end accumulated surplus is just over $76 million. So with that being said, I'd like to take you through some of the other note disclosures just to bring to your attention some of the higher related items in the year. So we're going to jump a few pages. Basically moving into the notes of the financial statements. And I'll give you all a page reference number momentarily. I think the first place we'd like to start is page 13, note 4, called taxes and user charges receivable. The other note disclosures that are included in here are fairly consistent in the prior year, similar to your significant accounting policies and note disclosures, but I'm just going to reflect on some of the more relevant items. So on page 13, note 4, I want to focus on your taxes receivable because I think this is a very important focus point for the municipality. At the end of the day, property and business taxes receivable are in the tune of over 3.5 million. So it has increased from the prior year. As a result of it, looking at those receivable balances and looking at all the properties, management has determined that a $1.8 million allowance is considered appropriate. So based on that, really there's a net amount of $1.7 million that management believes is still collectible. Now, we've had conversations with management on this piece, and a lot of these issues have been resolved in the new year, and we've talked with management on their process to resolve these, and Harley's been doing a lot of follow-up with a lot of these larger outstanding balances to understand, are we going to collect payment on them, what's the situation, and we encourage management that at the end of the day, if payment's not likely or there's concerns about it, that at the end of the day, to consider maybe writing off some of these balances because if again, the likelihood or there's been confirmation it won't be collected, the municipality still has the opportunity to claw back the education portion associated with those taxes that have been paid to the school boards in the past. So we encourage management to continue to focus their efforts on this collection and to consider writing off balances that are no longer collectible to be able to claw back the education portion from the school boards. The other piece that we'll draw your attention to as well is the debt itself, and I always like to do this for council just to put it in perspective. But essentially, if we draw our attention to note 7, and I apologize here because I noticed that the years themselves here just need to be updated, but if we go to page 17, note B, this shows essentially a layout of what the principal debt repayments are, and I apologize because 2021 should be 2022 and so forth and so on, so that will be adjusted in the finalized financial statements. But here you can see essentially what the principal debt repayment expectations are for the municipality in the upcoming years. So to provide it in perspective, essentially what that expectation is from a budgeting perspective going forward. And I believe, in terms of note disclosures, that is mainly the majority of what I wanted to discuss. So what I'd like to do now is draw council's attention to Schedule 1, which is on page 25. So at the end of the day here, this is essentially a buildup of what your accumulated surplus is made up of. So there's various different considerations here. And what I like to focus on first is your reserve and reserve funds. So essentially these are funds that either internal reserves have been set by council for purposes in the future spending, and reserve funds, which are funds that essentially should have money and funds set aside for these balances here. So you can see some of the changes that have happened in the year. You can see that there's been more funds put aside for working capital purposes that have been budgeted, and similarly, total reserve funds. And management has recommended some reserve transfers or reserve fund transfers in consideration, which is why there's resolutions that management's going to recommend to have passed. So you can see that at the end of the day, there's total reserves of just over 9 million and total reserve funds over 9 million as well. The net equity in government business enterprises is essentially the value of your investment within Sioux Lookout Hydro. So overall, those are all positive items of funds being set aside, but I'd like to draw your attention to the top of this document. So what we'll note here is that there is a general fund, and the difference in your general fund is the true reality of essentially what has occurred in the year. Now that general fund is made up of a few things, and we'll let management speak to it momentarily. But essentially the change there really represents what the surplus is in the year. So as a result, the change between the 836 negative from last year to the negative $1.6 million in the general fund this year represents basically the deficit that was earned by the municipality. Now, the reason for that deficit as well is because there is some unfunded capital that exists in there as well. And as well, there has been some funds that management would like to have transferred to some of these reserve funds and considerations. The other items you see below general fund is the investment in tangible capital assets, which is the value of your assets. And then you'll see all the unfunded amounts as well that are presented there. So again, the council doesn't budget for these things all in 1 year. They budget for it on a yearly basis. So debt is one of those items. Employee future benefits is another one of those items. Home for the aged is another. And then the landfill closure and post-closure liabilities. So overall, you can see all of these items essentially equate to $76,005,311, which matches your accumulated surplus on the statement of financial position and statement of operations. So I'd like to take a moment here to pause right now for any questions, or if there are no questions, to allow management to speak to the general fund if they'd like to do so.
Council questions? Or management? Treasurer.
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, what we do in the finance department once we receive the financial statements is throughout the year we have a tracking log for all of our capital projects that happen in 2021 and that have happened previous to that are still unfunded. So what staff do is we look at all the adjustment journal entries that are provided to us from the auditors, we make sure that their ending numbers match our ending numbers within the system. And then we double check our numbers in regards to capital to make sure that we have our list is fully complete as to what is still unfunded from all of our capital projects, because some projects that we currently have, as you know, have gone on over the years, like the waterfront project. So we make sure that all those years are added within that cost to have the true figure of what we would consider from an operating point of view, what is unfunded still from capital, and then what our surplus would be from, let's say, operating accounts. So that is still, we're still going through all those documentations and making sure that our numbers match exactly the auditor's number, and then from there we'll be able to give council a full breakdown of what is currently unfunded for capital, still on our books, and what is there for operating.
CIO?
Just to add to that, what we mean by unfunded is that timing. So if a project extends over 2 years and we haven't finished it yet, any debt that we're incurring, we would finance it once the project is done, and we know those final numbers. So that's why that number shows unfunded or unfinanced capital. It will be financed, but not it wasn't financed at the end of 2021.
Council? Richard, back to you.
Thank you. So with that being said, the remainder of the schedules, Schedule 2 just provides a breakdown essentially of your different capital assets. So the only thing I wanted to note here associated with it is that you'll note under the cumulative amortization section, you'll notice that there's some larger write-downs with the roads and water distribution. There was also some assets identified that should have been capitalized in the past as well. So it was kind of both. There's costs identified that should have been capitalized, and there was also write-downs that are recognized based on the usage there. So that's how we get that 1.1 million. But this really shows essentially the value of your assets at the end of the year. And Schedule 3 just essentially shows a breakdown of the activity across the different departments or segments in this case. So again, it's just further disclosure. I'm not going to go through it in detail with council, but it's one of the requirements that need to be disclosed in the statement, so therefore is included as one of your schedules. But with that being said, that's all I have to present. So thank you for everyone's time, and if there's any other questions, happy to answer them at this point.
Council. Councilor Lego.
Actually, a question for the treasurer. For our debt, the loans, page 16 and page 17, 2021 is 18.2 million. Would you be able at some point give us a breakdown of what is user pay loans and what is taxation?
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, there will be a report coming to council on the breakdown for all the loans, and along with that, with a recommendation from staff as to which projects we would like to go out for loans that have been fully completed. So with that, we'll show the updated user fees versus taxation.
Okay, thank you.
Council, anything further? So it's my understanding that there's no further questions, then there will be a motion to accept the auditor's report for 2021. So, Councillor Cassidy? No, sorry, you're just... no, not yet, thanks. Just to be clear to council, that this will basically end the discussion, and we'll be accepting it when the motion is put out on the table. Okay. Thank you very much, CAO. Is that it for the auditor then?
Mr. Worship.
Thank you very much to the audit team. Thank you, Treasurer.
Thank you.
And we will have a motion that council authorizes and directs that, this is the one now, correct? Thank you. and $1,204,000 in 2020 COVID-19 funding be transferred to the general reserve to be fully utilized in 2022. And the council adopts the 2021 consolidated audited financial statements for the Corporation of the Municipality of Sioux. Moved by Councillor Lego, seconded by Councillor Costco. All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
If I may, Your Worship, those are two separate motions.
Well, they need to be two separate motions. So let's say that first motion was for the first part, and now we will adopt. So clerk, that'll be the mover and seconder. Carried is for the first half of that motion. And now we'll do the council adopts the 2021 consolidated audited financial statements for the Corporation of the Municipality of Sioux. Moved by Councillor Costco, seconded by Councillor Cassidy. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. I'm not sure where the noise is coming from. Okay, thanks. Consideration of items requiring separate discussion. There are none. Notice of motion to reconsider. Sorry, consideration of items requiring. Now we go back to, yes, there are two items. Excuse me. 7.1. The council receives the municipal operating breakdown as of December 31st, 2022. Moved by Councillor Lego, seconded by Councillor Van Breda. Discussion starting with Councillor Lego.
First question. What do we pay into the landfill post-closure annually? Have council set that at a certain amount that we pay?
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, a report was directed, I'll rephrase that again. Council had directed staff to come back with a report to council in regards to how we are going to fund that landfill closure costs, and that will be coming in the near future. So it's yet to be determined.
Okay. And so the recommendation in your report is for the landfill estimated surplus of $115,000.
So through you, Mayor Lawrence, that's what we're anticipating the surplus is going to be for the operations of the landfill. So that automatically goes into the landfill reserve fund for day-to-day operations, for the building, IT, fleet, and if the landfill were to be in a deficit in 1 year, then that's what that reserve fund is used for. No, there's a post-closure reserve fund specifically for that, which is separate.
And we pay for that annually?
Pardon?
We pay into that annually?
Not at this moment, no. There will be a report coming to council in the future to discuss that.
Okay, and that's at $535,000, I believe?
So we currently have around $350,000 in the landfill closure reserve fund at the moment, and then according to the audited statements, I believe it was around $553,000 that there should be in there.
Okay. I will bring my other questions to the budget meeting.
Okay.
Or solutions.
Okay.
Thank you. Oh, I do have other questions. Sorry about that.
Just to get, can I follow up with
Sure.
the landfill reserves and the closure reserve funds? Those staff would have to come to council for approval to use those reserves?
So through you, Mayor Lawrence, the landfill reserve fund, that one in particular, is set through a bylaw that determines what the reserve fund can and cannot be used for. So if council wishes to go outside the scope of that, then the bylaw would need to be brought back to council and amended for approval to use it outside the scope of the fund, the purpose of the fund.
But staff can use it, because it's a bylaw, staff can use the fund without bringing that to council?
As long as it's approved through the budget and it pertains specifically for the Hidden Lake landfill itself, then yes.
Thank you. Thanks, Councilor Lego.
If you want to go to the budget to actuals, and on page, right near the end, page 37, let me just get down here.
Oops.
So page 37,
Oh, wow, 37.
the actual pages. At the top,
At the top,
under corporate overhead,
okay.
and then that's on page 36, and then page 37, external transfers, so the top line, 431,000. There was nothing, we did not budget for anything, but in the actuals, we have 431,000. Can you just sort of explain what the external transfers are for?
Yeah, so through you, Mayor Lawrence, that mostly pertains to mat tax that the municipality has collected where we owe the mat tax committee 50%. That is that transfer right there.
That answers my question about mat tax. Thank you. And then on page 38, where's that?
It's right at the bottom, I think.
Okay, sorry, page. Yeah, 38, taxation adjustments, right at the bottom. Just for the rebates and write-offs, in the budget, it was 46,000, and then where it says actuals are writing off 777,000. Can you just sort of explain or comment on what that's all is and why there's a discrepancy?
Yeah, so through you, Mayor Lawrence, there was a couple of things that occurred in 2022. There was a rebate that came in through an adjustment in regards to the flooding. So there was a flooding adjustment that was going to be that which was brought to council's attention, approximately $48,000. In regards to that, there's a couple of RFRs that came through in regards to adjustments on properties.
And define RFR, thanks.
Oh, sorry, request for reconsideration. There was also a lot of back and forth in regards to the allowance for doubtful that was just mentioned with the auditors. So that most of that money will be moved. We had already kind of written off in prior years, and it's been sitting in our allowance for doubtful account, which has been an expense already. So that adjustment still needs to be made on our books. So that number will be going down.
And in the end, does that affect any surplus that we would?
Yes, it would.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. Council, anything further on the 2022 operating financial report? If there's nothing further, we have a mover and a seconder. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Item 7.2, lobby the federal government to reinstate the northern allowance for the Sioux area notice, and this is a notice of motion. So it's submitted by Councillor Van Breda at the January 18th, 2023 council meeting. Whereas the federal government provides financial assistance to those Canadians living in one of two zones, namely the northern zone and the intermediate zone, via taxation credits and allowances. And whereas the municipality of Sioux and surrounding areas used to be part of the intermediate zone, but this classification was removed a couple of decades ago, and residents in our community and immediate area no longer qualify for the deductions and allowances. And whereas the cost of living in northern rural communities continues to rise at a significant rate, which in the last year has also been compounded by the high rate of inflation, thereby making the cost of living and working in our community even more burdensome. Now therefore be it resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the Municipality of Sioux directs staff to petition the federal government to designate the municipality of Sioux as a prescribed intermediate zone. And further, be it resolved that this correspondence be circulated to the Honorable Eric Malelu, MP Kenora, the Honorable Saul Mamakwa, MPP Kiwetanung, the Kenora District Municipal Association, the Northwestern Ontario Municipal Association, the Township of Pickle Lake, and the Municipality of Red Lake. Move by. Do I need, clerk, can you help me? Thank you.
Mayor Lawrence, our mover was last month, and that's Councillor Van Breda. We just need a
So
seconder.
to put this on the table, we need a seconder for this motion, and it can't be Councillor Van Breda. Councillor Lego, thank you. Discussion. Councillor Timpson.
Just as a small bit of information, that I had done some looking into this last council term, and I was instructed to take it to the Kenora District Municipal Association, which I did, and they had no interest at all in lobbying for it, since it only affected 1 or 2 municipalities. And so it's now back with the municipality here.
And I guess that thus specifically mentioning Pickle Lake and Red Lake, because it would affect them as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Cassidy.
I guess, given that this is a federal concern, is there, I think we look outside our provincial boundaries, and if there are other communities, that those are who we should also be sending this to, alongside Pickle. If that's where we want to go, I think that, yes, we do have higher cost of living here. We do think we do see some of that, just even directly resulting in our gas prices being almost a guaranteed 20 cents higher than 40 minutes down the road. I don't see a problem with this. I think it shows the community that we're trying to do what we can as council to help with cost of living, and trying to make the case to bring some consideration back by the federal government to people in the community.
Councillor Bowen.
And I would like to, receive a report from maybe Eric on what transpired and what the reasoning was to take it away 15, 20 years ago. It's been a while, maybe 25 years. So that would enable us to make a counter offer, so to speak.
Good. CAO.
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, to Councillor Bohm, I believe that we do have some history within the municipality of how that came about. So I'll check with our clerk, and we'll bring that forward.
Thank you.
So if I can just ask the AO about the process, there'll be a letter written that will be with the motion and distributed to these. I can follow up personally with in my monthly meeting with Eric Malillo, and contact Saul Mamakwe and follow up with him. Then would staff follow up with KDMA that convenes, our Councillor Timpson, and NOMA, would staff follow up with the Executive Director of NOMA? Yeah. And Township of Pickle Lake and Red Lake, you'll follow up as well? Okay. Very good. Councillor Bowen.
So who's going to do the checking out, like Councillor Cassidy mentioned, other communities across the country that made, that at the same time lost their designation, and maybe we can get them on board.
I wonder if we can work through FCM or something. Would they have a CAO? Yeah.
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, first what we would do is just research how it came about, what municipalities were affected when the change was made, and then we can go from there and find out those municipalities and get them on board and send copies of the resolution to them for their support.
Good. Anything further, Council? Thank you. So all in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Very good.
And notices of motion, we have none. We have an outside resolution. And this is being put, the resolution came forward, came to us, and staff have put this on the agenda because they feel we may want to consider it. Town of Petrolia, resolution regarding school board elections. Whereas in the province of Ontario, municipalities are responsible to conduct the election process on behalf of the school boards, and whereas an extensive amount of resources, time, and management to advertise, coordinate, and complete these trustee elections is placed on the municipality, and whereas municipalities do not receive any compensation or reimbursement for use of orchestration of the school board trustee elections, therefore be it resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Petrolia requests that staff forward this motion to Honourable Stephen Lecce, Minister of Education, MPP Bob Bailey, Ontario Municipal Councils, and the County of Lambton, requesting that school boards become responsible for conducting their own trustee elections, or at a minimum, municipalities be compensated by the school boards for overseeing such trustee elections. CAO, how do we, this is an outside resolution, how do we proceed from here?
We look for a mover and a seconder. I don't believe we did that yet on the resolution. And then it's open for council discussion. And if you choose to support the motion, then we would follow through with it.
So that's what we're actually, we're moving this resolution.
To support the town of Petrolia.
Okay.
And forward it to all of the avenues that they have suggested in their motion.
Does the motion need to have that added to it, that this is to support it? It feels like I'm reading a resolution for the town of Petrolia. Mm-hmm. Therefore, be it resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Petrolia requests that staff.
Okay, so we would add to that, now therefore be resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the Town of the Municipality of Sioux Lookout support the motion and then forward this to the agencies and government bodies that Petrolia has indicated in their resolution.
So I need a mover first to put it on the table. Moved by Councillor Lego, seconded by Councillor Timpson. Discussion. Starting with Councillor Cassidy.
Councillor Bowen.
Oh, I thought, oh, you.
Councillor Bowen put his left hand up.
Oh, you put your right, oh, maybe you were pointing to him, sorry. Councillor, seconded, let the record show, it was, seconder was Councillor Bowen. Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Timpson. Councillor Cassidy, you had a.
Just a question, and maybe the CEO can answer this. We heard the auditor state about tax revenue that we don't think will be able to be collected, and the ability to go to the school board section to claw some of that revenue back. Would this impact that ability?
Through Mayor Lawrence. No, this is specifically dealing with elections.
Just to run the elections, okay.
What the auditor was referring to is whenever we write off municipal taxes on a property, so when we collect the tax levies, we also collect the education tax on all of the properties, and then we have to remit that to the school boards. And we remit it whether we collect it or not from the property owners. So when we write off taxes, there's a portion of the school board taxes that's in there. So we have the ability to claw that back. In other words, get that money back from the school boards in our reconciliations.
So they're separated, okay.
Okay,
No, that's good.
yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Timpson.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't think that the electorate need another election, and I could just see that, you know, if they have two elections around that same time, people are just not going to bother showing up to one or the other of them, and I don't see any advantage to the school board running its own elections. They don't have the infrastructure, the knowledge, or the history. I think it's fair that we continue to do this, but it's also fair that maybe we should be reimbursed and that should be the focus of this resolution. I don't know how, if the other rest of council agreed with that. Can we indicate that we agree with part of the resolution, or just do we have to agree with the entire resolution?
My thought, that's a good point, but my thought is that others would come to that conclusion, and the goal would be to get compensation for the municipality. I think you're right. And I think the province and school would see the reality of that, but then the next position is, at a minimum, municipalities be compensated for doing it. So I agree with you, but I think...
I think it's risky, though, to say that this is what we want. They might just give you what you want, and that's
Well-
not what we want.
Well,
So-
it's up, that would be up to the school boards and the province to decide if that was viable or not, in my view. Council?
I agree. I think that they would realize that it is cost prohibitive to run their own elections, therefore compensating the municipality at a much less cost. I think that's what they're saying. I don't think they actually want to run their own elections. They're just saying that there's the option, which would be very cost prohibitive, or you could just simply compensate the municipalities.
I think perhaps they're trying to make the resolution stronger by saying, look, we don't want to do this. We will if we get paid for it, but we don't want to do it. Figure it out, okay, we don't want to do it either, we'll pay for it. I think is sort of where that conversation, yeah, I think you have, the stick is, we don't want to do it, we're not going to do it. And we want to be compensated. So respectfully, Councillor Timpson, my view is leave it as it is and let others figure that out.
I suppose.
Because I think everybody else would agree with you that
I suppose, yeah.
it doesn't make any sense. But so let's pay the people who are doing it. Further, sorry, clerk. Thank you.
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, I do have a few comments from the clerk
Okay.
that he wished to share on the issue here. One is the cost is it's costly. Of course, we're all aware of that. But the other ones, the complexity, the distribution of trustee seats among the 4 different school boards can be challenging for the clerks to administer, as depending on the allocation of seats and the regional geography. Certain clerks must serve as returning officers for other communities. Example, Sioux Lookout clerk is returning officer for English public trustee for both Sioux Lookout and Ignace. The Thunder Bay clerk is the returning officer for almost all municipalities in the Thunder Bay, Rainy River, and Kenora districts for the French Separate School Board. This requires a very careful coordination among the clerks and takes more time. The other one he mentioned was the compatibility. Municipal clerks aren't experts at the school board governance or operations. As such, it takes time, some time and challenging to respond completely to questions from the school board trustee, while the school boards do make some literature available via the variety of websites. It can still be challenging for us to answer for the candidates. The other thing I might as well just read out for costs. The time and coordination involved in administrating the school board elections adds to the overall cost of the municipal election. If this responsibility was removed, it would reduce our cost. Additionally, when errors occur, the cost can be even higher. And he made an example that Dryden, it cost for a by-election of $15,000 more. So I just wanted to share those with him as well.
Thank you very much. If CAO, I was going to look at the treasurer, but not here. My recollection, we set aside on each term of council $100,000. Is it $100,000? So $25,000 per year, or what is the number?
If my memory serves me correctly, we transferred $10,000 a year.
Okay.
50.
50?
I thought it was 50.
We must have increased it because it was 10.
15 per year, yeah. Okay, so I had, okay, good.
50.
Yeah, so 60,000. So there's, and that is the cost that might be able to be reduced. Is that, yeah. I just also recall, maybe others do, in the last municipal election, not ours, but in the Thunder Bay area. I'm quite sure it was the municipality of Sioux. There was a school board name was left off the ballot inadvertently somehow. It was being run by the municipality, and it resulted in derailing, for delaying the municipal election results as well as that, because they had to redo, somehow it implicated the municipal election as well as the school board election in Sioux. So it's just a mistake that could be happen, that, you know, from the complexity that the clerk was just telling us, that happens, and all of a sudden impacts our election as well. Council, further comments, discussion? Councillor Timpson.
Well, in fairness, I mean, similar mistakes could happen with the council election as well. And,
absolutely, but those are our mistakes for our election. And I guess what I think what the clerk's department is saying is they know more about our elections, and it's sort of one jurisdiction is council versus 4 school boards and different nominees, etc. So,
yeah. I mean, it would seem to me that the school board could compensate us possibly for and pay for our entire election. If we got something from each one of them, we might be able to pay for the entire election, and the extra work could be worth it. You know, really, it's. I don't think we should support not running the election.
okay, we'll find out if council agrees with you or not when we put the motion to the vote. Councillor Cassidy.
I see this as a form of provincial downloading. They're responsible for education. And if there's school board trustees that need to be appointed, then they should pay their fair share for how they are elected and how this process is run. That's just, it's simple. So I see this as a bit of a pushback and say, no, come to the table and pay your fair share. And I fully support anything that pushes back against provincial downloading. So I support this.
Anything further, council? Everybody knows the motion then that's here. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And that brings us to council reports. And we'll go around the table. Councillor Costco.
I'm on the Truth and Reconciliation Committee, which we don't have enough members, so I have actively, hopefully recruited 3 members. I have given them the paperwork, and hopefully get to that. I will follow up to make sure if I have to go pick up the paperwork and deliver it myself, I go. I have had conversations with them, and in the conversations verbally, they have agreed, and I think they're very strong candidates, so I'm looking forward to the fact that we may be able to have a Truth and Reconciliation meeting soon. And I've also reached out to Darlene Adjikina to talk with her about her roles on the committee. So that's what I've been doing.
Thank you. Councillor Bone.
I attended the special council meetings January 19th and February 13th. I also attended the orientation / meeting for the Committee of Adjustment Board. Got to know each other. We were there to elect a chair and a vice chair, but we were just short a couple members. So we're going to meet again and get that going.
Thank you. Councillor Timpson.
Yes, I've missed a number of meetings for personal reasons. I had to be in Southern Ontario for an extended time in January. However, I was able to participate in hospital meetings virtually and address with the board the resignation of the CEO and the appointment of the interim CEO. And we been correspondence concerning issues at the library, although I did miss their board meeting, but there's been a fair bit of correspondence and involvement there. And that's about it. The Environment Committee hasn't had quorum, or didn't have quorum the first meeting, and I think they've had quorum.
The last meeting.
Yeah, you missed it, didn't you? Yeah, yeah. So it's just getting going as well. So that's about all I have.
Perfect. Thank you. So for me, I also attended the January the 9th, 18th, and the 19th meeting, as well as the meeting on the 13th of February. Again, I was gone from February 1st until the 10th, so I also missed the environmental committee meeting that was held on the 2nd. So this was the second meeting, and this one did have quorums. Unfortunately, Councillor Timpson and I missed it. However, I read over the meeting minutes, and it seemed like it was a productive meeting. And I'm now excited that now the meeting will be held the first Thursday of every month. So now there's a time and place where it's going to be now consistent. And I am excited to the first meeting, which would be the first Thursday of March now. I also spoke to various residents about possibly joining the Truth and Reconciliation Committee and hopefully get that running up as soon as possible. And I left some paperwork for people to fill out at the Friendship Center. However, I've not heard of anyone filling it out yet. However, there is still time. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the next budget meeting next week.
Thank you. Councillor Cassidy.
Yeah, for myself, Hydro Board meeting. There's some reports about the substation. I think that'll be getting posted publicly, so I'll be sure to share that when they come out. We decided not to have a meeting this month just because it was year end and there wasn't a whole lot of new business to discuss. Also attended PACE. I was actually able to make that in person. Good meeting, good discussion. The one interesting point that came up at PACE was about their incubator program, where PACE funds or has some space, office space, and they lease it out to businesses that are just trying to get started and get established and build clientele. So they mentioned that they are looking to expand because that program was successful, and they do want to look to expand in Sioux Lookout. So something I'm hoping to get a little more insight into as we go and possibly look at some options here that might be viable. So,
Thank you. Councillor Lego.
I had a LCC meeting on February 7th. There was discussion about work schedules for Caribou Forest and Lac Sioux Forest. When Lac Sioux was doing their presentation, I asked about hardwood for the biomass projects that are going to be going on at some point in Lac Sioux and Sioux Lookout. I asked how much woods would be needed for to run the plants for the year, and they said that was about 250 cubic meters of birch. And then I asked about supply moving into the future, and they basically said there's tens of thousands of cubic meters of birch out in the bush to use, so 50 years of supply available for the biomass. Also, there will be an open house for the Lac Sioux Forest Operation Plan. That will be on March the 7th at the Legion from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. So if you want to go look at the plan for operations in the forest, you can go see some of the staff from the MNRF there. And also attended the February 13th special council meeting.
Thank you. And in my forgetfulness, forgetting my briefcase, which had my electronic device and my notebook. So now you'll have to rely on my unreliable memory. A couple of things that I had the privilege of attending. One was an award ceremony for OPP, where the regional commissioner came up, and there were several. It was not only from Sioux Lookout, there's some people from Pickle Lake and area, but certainly some Sioux Lookout members received awards for bravery and citations. And also our fire service received, Greg Olson received an award for his actions for bravery in a fire. So that was interesting. It was lovely to see. There was another event like that I had the privilege of attending. It's escaping me now. Certainly we want to congratulate Robbie Favot for 46 years. That's something. As well as the council meetings that you've all attended. I attended, and with the CAO and Councillor Timpson, you neglected to mention you were in Toronto at the Roma conference and attended with us. The delegations the municipality had with MNRF related largely to Crown land, I would say, was the release of Crown land. We had delegations with the Solicitor General, with our coalition partners, Pickle Lake and Sioux Lookout, Pickle Lake and Kenora, We had 2 delegations with the Solicitor General at Roma. We had a delegation with the Ministry of the Attorney General, and that we were trying to look at similarly, it's alternative justice and methods to keep people, virtual justice, courts in their own home communities, divert people to appropriate services, and also we obviously lobbied for those appropriate services. We had a meeting with the Ministry of Health, and that had to do with mental health and addictions, and the Minister of Health, Sylvia Jones, was present, as well as the Associate Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, Michael Tibilow. And that was related largely to the funding for the addictions and treatment that are we hope going to be happening. It's getting closer and closer and closer to starting. With the Minister of Transportation, Carolyn Mulrooney, we advocated for, we asked the question, the bypass from the flooding last year. What's the plan? And they're in the design process of upgrades to the bypass to make sure that it would be above that flood level. I'm not sure what their criteria is, but and we also lobbied for some maintenance on some sections of road, the Goody Lake Road, I think, where it's isolated from the municipality, and because of certain arrangements, it's going to fall on it's already on the municipality, but the contractor that we're using may be out. So we're trying to have MTO take that up, because it would be so difficult for us to service maintenance on something that's 25 kilometers from everything else that we do. And we also asked about the Pelican Falls Road, about them taking that on. That was our delegations?
Just to add to that, staff did follow up, and we have a meeting the first week in March with them to discuss those items that we discussed with the minister.
While at Rome, I also attended delegations with the District Services Board, and you get to, one of the advantages there, you get to put your face in front of the Solicitor General again, the Attorney General again, and the Minister of Health on more regional issues, district issues, but we're there, and I think that's good. Also a spin-off to Roma, we had a meeting, the CIO and I, with Chief Bull, in which we were doing a sort of a consultation process on the Crown land release. Chief Bull also updated us on the grave search, the missing children, and what the activities that are going to be underway there. And I'll leave any public statements to Lac Seul First Nation to make. Kenora District Services Board meetings, Northwestern Health Unit Board meeting. We've had Policing Cost Coalition meetings and a follow-up meeting with the Solicitor General with our coalition, I guess earlier this week, was it? And multiple other meetings, and that's the extent of my memory. Thank you for your understanding. And now we move into closed session to discuss matters of a general nature at 7:10 p.m. to discuss subject matter relating to a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board pursuant to the Municipal Act 2001 as amended, Section 239(2)K, one item, policing matters, and subject matter relating to personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, per Municipal Act 2001 as amended, Section 239(2)B, one item, appointments to council boards, commissions, and committees, membership. Moved by Councillor Cassidy, seconded by Councillor Van Breda. All in favor? Carried. All right. Ratification of resolutions, passing of resolutions from closed session. That council approves amending Schedule A to bylaw number 68-22.
Would you like me to read through them all?
Sure.
Okay.
Thanks, Sarah.
Okay, through you, Mayor Lawrence, we have two being passed tonight. The first one is that council ratifies the direction given to staff regarding policing matters.
Moved by Councillor Cassidy, seconded by Councillor Timpson. All in favor? Carried.
And the second one is that council approves amending Schedule A to bylaw number 6822, being a bylaw to make appointments to various boards, commissions, and committees by adding Jennifer Hantrock to the Sioux Lookout Environment Committee, Harry Sankar to the Sioux Lookout Environment Committee, Councillor Raymond Anjikanab as the Lac Sioux First Nation representative to the Municipal Committee of Truth and Reconciliation.
Thank you. We had a mover and a seconder already? No. Moved by Councillor Van Breda, seconded by Councillor Timpson. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. The bylaw number 08-23 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Municipality of Sioux Lookout February 15th, 2023 regular council meeting be read a first, second, and third time and passed. Moved by Councillor Bone, seconded by Councillor Cassidy. All in favor? Carried. And that brings us to adjournment in the usual way. Thanks very much, Council.